If we look at reality, we too have become part of the crowd. We have forgotten ourselves in this crowd, and we dance to its tune like puppets. Whatever the crowd says, we follow it blindly. Only a few people truly live their own lives, and they are the ones who guide others on the right path, teaching them how to live. Let's try to understand this through a story. Living a half-hearted life brings us no benefit. A long time ago, there was a king in a certain kingdom, and a son was born to him. This son was his only child, and he was still very young. On one hand, the king had already drawn the lines of his entire life, deciding what he would become, how he would be, what he would do, and how he would grow into a mighty king. The king had everything planned out. However, he forgot one important thing. We are born with our own distinct identity, character, and destiny, like a river's clear, pure flow. Unfortunately, we lose that natural flow and adopt the ways of the crowd because it feels safer, as we feel secure in the company of the crowd. We no longer enjoy discovering new things and instead consider ourselves superior by just following the crowd. The king's son was no different. He didn't want to become the king of the kingdom. He had a soft and tender heart filled with compassion, and he found no joy in violence. He loved painting and dancing. That was his true calling. If he had followed it, he would have achieved wholeness. But his father disliked all of this, and as a result, the king became angry with his son. The king tried everything to make his son grow into the king he wanted him to be, to develop the best qualities of a ruler, but the son remained unaffected. As time passed, the prince grew older, but his nature stayed the same, which upset the king even more. The king started scolding his son, sometimes even telling him things like, "It would have been better if I had no son at all, than to have a son like you. Do you know how much people laugh at me when they hear that my son loves to dance and paint? Do you know what they say about me because of you?" His father's words hurt the prince. He decided to follow his father's wishes, hoping that one day, after making his father happy, he could return to his simple life. From that day on, the prince trained tirelessly and eventually became a warrior so formidable that he was unbeatable. He fought many battles that seemed impossible to win, but his bravery and skill led him to victory each time. Every time he returned home victorious, he expected his father to finally be proud of him. But each time his father would simply say, "Son, you still have much to learn. You are not yet a complete warrior." And so the prince worked even harder, pouring all his strength into becoming the perfect warrior. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, his father never showed him the pride he longed for. Gradually, the prince forgot who he truly was and what he really wanted. His inner compassion had turned into cruelty. Friends, something similar happens in our own lives. In trying to fulfill others' expectations and responsibilities, we forget ourselves and end up living a life that isn't even ours. But the most fortunate people are those who live life on their own terms and do what they truly want to do. One day, while the prince was roaming around his kingdom, he noticed a young woman. She was incredibly beautiful, and the prince was drawn to her. Love blossomed in his heart, and he called her to the palace. He laid before her many treasures and jewels, then confessed his love, saying, "Everything you see here is yours if you accept my proposal for marriage." But the woman, offended, replied, "Prince, I do not love you. What use do I have for these stones? If you truly love me, give me the thing most precious to you. Can you give it to me?" The prince responded, "I am ready to give you whatever you ask." She then said, "I don't want your palace, your kingdom, or your riches. I am a simple woman, and I want you to live as a simple man with me. Can you leave all of this behind and live a simple life with me?" Hearing this, the prince was deeply puzzled. The young woman smiled and said, "Prince, your wealth, your empire, your status, none of this matters in life. Wealth, respect, position, and prestige often become the measures of love. You've surely noticed how those with more wealth and respect seem to receive more love and care, but this is not true. People are not respecting the person. They are respecting the wealth and position that person holds. It's all a show, a lie, and behind these lies, we waste our lives chasing after them." The prince reflected deeply on her words and finally said, "I am ready to live a simple life with you, as you wish. But first, I must inform my parents and seek their blessing." When the king learned of this, he was furious. He ordered his soldiers to arrest both the woman and the prince and bring them to the royal court. The soldiers did as commanded, and the king sentenced the woman to death for treason. In his pride and power, the king had forgotten the difference between justice and injustice, thinking only of his authority. Hearing the king's decree, the woman pleaded, "What have I done wrong? I only came here at the prince's request. You have no right to sentence me to death." The prince also tried to reason with his father, but the king would not listen. Desperate, the prince said, "Father, if you let her go, I will do whatever you ask of me." The king, overjoyed, freed the woman and arranged for the prince to marry a princess instead. The new princess was highly ambitious and wanted to rule the kingdom as soon as possible, which meant the death of the king was necessary. She began convincing the prince that his father was too old to rule, and it was time for him to take over. The prince, harboring anger towards his father, agreed with her. The seed of betrayal had been planted in his heart. One day, during a war with a neighboring kingdom, the prince found himself trapped by the enemy. His father, seeing this, rushed to save him. The prince, seeing his father come to his aid, thought to himself, "This is my chance. If I kill my father, the kingdom will be mine." But as he was contemplating this, an enemy struck the prince. At that moment, the king threw himself in front of the blow, taking the fatal strike. As he lay dying, the king told his son, "Now you are worthy to rule. Go and save the kingdom. I am proud of you." With these words, the king died. Filled with regret, the prince realized he had always loved his father, and that his anger had been misplaced. He returned to the battlefield, fought bravely, and won the war. But inside, he felt he had lost everything. Upon returning to the palace, he punished the treacherous princess, sentencing her to life imprisonment. The prince was left feeling empty and lost, despite having everything. While the prince was wandering his kingdom, one day he came across a man dancing and singing in the street, dressed in a simple robe. The prince asked the man, "Who are you, and why are you dancing?" The man replied, "Who am I? That's what I'm trying to discover. Do I know you? Who are you?" The prince said, "I am the king of this kingdom." The man replied, "Yes, I also thought once that I was the king of this kingdom, but I later realized that I am nothing but a beggar." The prince, intrigued by the man's words, asked, "What do you mean by that? How can you say you were once the king, but now a beggar?" The man laughed softly and said, "Once upon a time I too was like you, full of ambition, pride, and desires. I ruled with strength, wanting more power, more wealth, and more respect. But one day, after losing everything dear to me, I realized something. All the riches, the respect, the power we chase after are illusions. They make us believe we are kings when, in truth, we are nothing more than beggars, constantly seeking validation from others. We spend our entire lives chasing things outside of us and forget to find true peace within ourselves." The prince felt a strange connection with the man. His own life, filled with battles and ambitions, felt hollow in comparison to the simple truth the man had discovered. The man continued, "I may wear this simple robe now, and I may dance in the streets, but I am free. I live without worry, without fear of losing anything. I no longer chase after what the world tells me I need. I live for myself, for the joy of each moment." Tears welled up in the prince's eyes. He had won wars, gained power, and even avenged his father, but none of it brought him peace. Now, standing before this simple man, he realized what he had lost: himself. The prince asked the man, "How did you find such peace? How can I free myself from this endless search for more?" The man smiled warmly and said, "By stopping. Stop running after the things that do not matter. The peace you seek is already within you, but you have buried it under layers of pride, ambition, and fear. Let go of the idea that you must be someone others expect you to be. Find what makes your soul dance and follow it. That's the real treasure." The prince, deeply moved, realized that he had spent his whole life trying to live up to his father's expectations, to win battles, and to gain approval. But in the process, he had forgotten who he truly was. The artist, the compassionate young man who once loved painting and dancing, had been lost in the pursuit of power. He thanked the man and, for the first time in years, smiled a true smile. The prince knew what he had to do. He returned to the palace, renounced his throne, and handed over the kingdom to his council. He left the palace with nothing but a simple robe, just like the man he had met. He decided to travel, painting, dancing, and living as his heart desired. As the prince wandered the lands, free from the burdens of expectation and power, he discovered the peace and joy he had been missing all along. He became known not as a warrior or a king, but as a wise man who taught others to live true to themselves. And so, friends, the lesson here is that no matter how much we achieve or how high we rise in life, if we do not live true to our own hearts, we remain beggars. The greatest treasure we can ever find is within ourselves, and the greatest victory is living authentically, following the path that makes our soul truly come alive. So the next time you find yourself chasing something that doesn't feel right, remember this story. Ask yourself, am I living my truth? Or am I living someone else's expectations? The answer might just lead you to a life full of peace and fulfillment.